promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Abuja. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. Senegal's new president, Diomaye Faye, today chairs his first Council of Ministers after the cabinet formation. Malian transitional authorities defend indefinite election postponement, citing withdrawal from ECOWAS as key reason.
The decree we are talking about was signed in the context of discussions with ECOWAS. We have been out of ECOWAS for some time. Everything that has been with the ECOWAS is null and void and has not come to Mali.
Liberian Senate set to endorse the establishment of War Crimes Court during Tuesday's session, and press associations in Guinea decried the jamming of private media signals.
It
is a question of taking the lessons from the fight we have been leading for 6 months and projecting ourselves in the future to see the possibility of going together for a common front in this fight.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia and Sierra Leone. Well, let's begin in Senegal, where the new government led by Ousmane Sonko is holding its first Council of Ministers meeting this Tuesday. Wednesday is the traditional day for the meeting, but the feast marking the end of Ramadan will be celebrated tomorrow, hence the meeting today. The new breakaway government team will be looking at the first issues to be tackled. The new Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko wants everything to move rapidly because expectations are high. While the new government is comfortably installed, the former ruling alliance for the Republic APR is considering its political future with attempt to become the main opposition party. Abdullah Hassan tells us more.
2 weeks after leaving office, the APR is already positioning itself as the party that is closely scrutinizing the activities and agenda of the new government, led by former opponents Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Ousmane Sonko. An initial press release from the party has already denounced the annulment of the decrees issued by the High Council of the Judiciary. The decrees were issued by former President Macky Sall on the eve of the end of his term in office. According to a Senegalese political analyst, Ibrahima Bahoum, the former ruling party is already positioning itself as an observer of the new government and could subsequently present itself as the main opposition party.
I think that the next opposition can only be the APR if it is structured. This opposition immediately has the means to contest certain things, starting with the decree in this case. So the APR can take advantage of these small shortcomings and has the chance to observe activities during the first 2 years and to reorganize. It should be noted that immediately the new government was installed, they already had 2 or 3 political opponents, including APR, in addition to the social and civil groups. These women who say they have not been taken into account sufficiently, that already makes them opposition as well.
Former Prime Minister Amadou Ba, the ruling party's candidate, who came second in the March 24 presidential election and now the de facto new leader of the opposition, has already set the tone. In a press release a few days ago, he called on APR supporters to remain mobilized and ready for the forthcoming political battles of a responsible and Republican opposition.
Abdullah Hassan reporting there. Let's take it to Mali, where the Transitional Authority has responded to recent calls by political and civil society organizations for a return to constitutional rule. The return, which can only be achieved through election, is not on the government's agenda, according to the Prime Minister. The statement has caused an uproar in recent days. Senegal Kokala Maiga, who gave his views on this issue, explained that the duration of the transition is set under the recommendations of the National Refoundation Conference. According to the head of the transitional government, and I quote, the agreement reached with ECOWAS is null and void, end of quote. Well, Augustine Kohli completes the story.
After numerous declarations by political actors and several civil society organizations, the transitional authorities are breaking their silence. At a meeting last week with the members of the Steering Committee for the Inter-Malayan Dialogue, Prime Minister Senegal Kokala Maiga made it clear that the duration of the transition had been set in accordance with the recommendations of the National Refundation Conference.
It is when the new president is going to be invested that the transition will take place. That is the constitution. But when you look at the revised charter, the second reference in its Article 27, the duration of the transition is set according to the recommendations of the National Refundation Conference. The transition is taking place with the presidential election organized by the authorities of the transition, the oath taking, and the search for a new country.
On the deadline agreed with the sub-regional powerhouse ECOWAS, the head of the transitional government believes that this agreement is no longer on the agenda.
The decree we are talking about was signed in the context of discussions with ECOWAS. We have been out of ECOWAS for some time. Everything that has been with the ECOWAS is null and void and has not come to Mali. We have put a cross on this organization, including everything we have negotiated with it.
According to the Prime Minister, the current transition will end with the investiture of an elected president by the current authorities. For the Synergy of Action for Mali, a platform that brings together political parties and civil society organizations, this constitutes a desire to remain in power.
Augustine Coley filed that report. Now, following several years of agitation, the Liberian Senate may endorse the establishment of a war crimes court in an ongoing session. A statement from Senate pro tempore Nyobele Kanga Lawrence states that a resolution from the House of Representatives will be put on the floor of the Senate after its committees on judiciary, defense, security, and intelligence reported that due to the delicacy of the matter, a debate be entertained for the full participation by the Liberian Senate. The joint resolution seeking the establishment of the court was endorsed by majority members of the House of Representatives several weeks ago and forwarded to the Senate for concurrence. Over the years, the Senate has refused to act on several petitions to establish the court. Today's decision will be a major move that will see the country put an end to impunity. Since the end of the country's decade-long civil war that killed more than 250,000 people in 2003, the country has refused to hold those bearing the greatest responsibility. Now, the French Minister of Foreign Affairs and Europe, Stéphane Séjourné, is completing his first African tour in Côte d'Ivoire, where he was received on Monday by the President of the Ivorian Republic, Alassane Ouattara. On the program were discussions on the special relationship between the two countries and the balanced partnership between France and Côte d'Ivoire. Gabierika has more details in this report filed in by WADR's Alban Ade in Abidjan.
The Ivorian head of state, Alassane Ouattara, and his guest, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Europe, Stéphane Séjourné, discussed a number of issues. The Ivorian president expressed his desire to strengthen cooperation between Abidjan and Paris.
We are very, very happy to welcome the foreign minister and to say a big thank you to the French Republic for the support it has given us in almost all areas, whether in the economic, social, security and information areas, and to say that Côte d'Ivoire is on the right track, the economy is doing well, the country is in peace. We are working on this. I'm confident that our excellent relation with France will continue, and we have made the point on all the subjects from an economic point of view.
After his meeting with Alassane Ouattara, the head of French diplomacy, Stéphane Séjourné, praised the partnership between France and Côte d'Ivoire.
I would like to salute the good results of the Ivorian economy. For more than a decade now, you have been able, in any case remarkably, to organize the economy and be on a dynamic trajectory. We are participating with French companies as the first buyers to the economy.
Prior to his visit to Abidjan, the French minister had traveled to Nairobi, where he also spoke of his desire to build balanced partnerships that would benefit African countries.
Ogaberika filed that report there, sent in by our correspondent in Abidjan, Alban Ade.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The Burkinabe Transitional President, Captain Ibrahim Traore, on Monday handed over military hardware, including a dozen combat drones, to the army. The drones consist mainly of Bayraktar TB2 and Bayraktar Akinci from the Turkish Dakar manufacturer. Captain Traore, while handing over the equipment, said all the tests were conclusive and therefore a source of pride to confirm that the aircraft were joining the fleet of the Burkinabe army. The head of state on the occasion also praised the healthy and sincere cooperation that the Turkey manufacturer maintains with Burkina Faso. The acquisition of this equipment is part of the implementation of the Strategic Equipment Plan for the National Armed Forces. Meanwhile, health authorities in Burkina Faso have expressed concern about the rising temperatures across the Sahel and intend to implement measures to protect the population. These actions are set to reduce morbidity and mortality that could be caused by the high temperatures of recent weeks, according to the Minister of Health. In a post on social media, the minister said it is important for citizens to prepare for an eventuality caused by the heat waves. Burkina Faso is sounding the alarm after Bamako reported more than 100 people killed from complications associated with heat waves within 4 days. Sanklu Danko tells us more in this report.
According to the Secretary General of the Health Ministry, Dr. Isa Ouedraogo, controlling the situation in health facilities across the country requires anticipation, better diagnosis and rapid management of cases. These measures, he said, will reduce morbidity and mortality, emphasizing the urgency to take stock of health centers in the face of this crucial rise in temperatures. Given the situation, the actors have been instructed to work hard to make available the data whose analysis will make it possible to effectively manage the cases, Ouedraogo said. The Secretary General specified that the current conditions of reception of patients, capacity of nursing staff, case management strategies during this period of high heat were among other things discussed during a meeting with his colleagues on Monday. While awaiting detailed information on the situation, the Burkinabe Ministry of Health is urging the population to take precautions, in particular to frequent water intake, watch over the elderly, and report any strange symptoms. The Sahel, already faced by existential climate-related challenges such as drought, is experiencing unprecedented temperature levels after decades of warning by the United Nations of categoric temperature rise that threatens the entire ecosystem unless actions are taken to avert such calamity.
Sanklu Janko filed that report. The Togolese government is cautioning its citizens against indiscriminate dissemination or broadcast of content online. The warning contained in a press release dated April 7 came in the wake of rising political tension attributed to the recently adopted constitution and postponement of the legislative and regional elections. Recall that at the end of last week, several opposition parties and a civil society group asked the population to mobilize to protest over the perceived unconstitutional actions of the state. David Vincent has more details in this report.
In the press release over the weekend, the state called for restraint and moderation in the dissemination and publication of content on social networks and other media of expression. Jointly released by the ministers in charge of justice and security, the government recalled the regulatory provisions governing the dissemination of false information, slander, defamation, and other abuses linked to the exercise of the right to freedom of expression and information in the country. Mipamb Nam Chugli and Calixte Majulba in the statement warned that relaying information via traditional media or social networks remains subject to respect for deontology and ethics in manner of information and communication. They insist all content must be verified before dissemination. The alarm comes at a time when Togo is dominated by debates and several political groups and civil society oppose the March 25 adopted constitution. While the nation awaits the announced electoral consultations, these groups are calling for 3 days of protests against the postponement of the legislative and regional elections despite a ban on demonstrations declared in 2021. The promotion of a safe media and digital environment for all, according to the presidency, remains a fundamental element for the protection of individual and public freedoms and for the strengthening of democracy in Togo.
David Vincent filed that report. A total of 162 Senegalese immigration candidates staying since the beginning of March in Dakar, WADR, a region in southern Morocco, will return to Senegal from Tuesday. According to the American government, the first convoy of these migrants should arrive in Saint Louis early Wednesday afternoon. The second convoy, due to leave Dakar on Thursday, should arrive the next day, Friday, in Saint Louis early in the afternoon, reports the Consulate General of Senegal in Dakar. Reports that 6 women, a baby aged less than a year, and 5 convalescent patients are part of the second group to be repatriated to Senegal. After these returns, according to the consulate, there will be no longer any Senegalese awaiting repatriation. At the same time, he assures that he has not recorded any arrivals of canoes from Senegal since the start of 2024. Of the canoes in which the 600 Senegalese beneficiaries of voluntary return travel this year had departed, Mauritania noted the consular authorities. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of the top stories. President Diomaye Faye of Senegal today chairs his first Council of Ministers after the cabinet formation. Malian transitional authorities defend the indefinite election postponement, citing withdrawal from ECOWAS as key reason. Liberian Senate said to endorse the establishment of War Crimes Court during Tuesday's session. And still ahead, press associations in Guinea decry the jamming of private media signals. We do have the newspaper review, guest interview, and sport update. Please stay with us.
You are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
Don't forget, we are streaming live on WADR.org, YouTube, and Facebook. In Ghana, 6 major civil society organizations have threatened to stage a demonstration if the government fails to address concerns about the $40 million worth of health commodities locked up at the Tema port. They include the leadership of the coalition of CSO networks in HIV, TB, and malaria. Addressing a press conference on Monday in Accra, the CSOs frowned at the continued delays in clearing the medicines which have been stuck at the port since May 2023. The commodities comprise antiretroviral for HIV treatment, tuberculosis, and malaria medicines, among others. The organization argued that the situation has created shortages of medical drugs in several health facilities across Ghana, putting lives at risk. Elsie Aye is president of the network of persons living with HIV.
The leadership of our country does not care about us. That people from outside will buy the needed medication, the needed equipment, commodities to help Ghanaians. And the things have arrived at the port and are seated there. And the fact that we are supposed to be implementing something called differentiated service delivery, to the extent even of modeling whatever the system to suit what the clients, what persons living with HIV, what persons living with TB need, what will enable them receive the sort of treatment that they need, the sort of health care that they need. All this has been put in place. And one of the key things for persons living with HIV is that we are giving our medications for longer periods, 6 months maximum, than 3 months. Last year we had 16,000 new infections, HIV infections, 9,000 HIV deaths.
Elsie Aye is the president of the network of persons living with HIV. In Guinea, the press associations and the journalists union are once again raising the stakes following the jamming of private media frequencies. These organizations were at the Maison de la Presse in Conakry on Monday. They are demanding that the authorities restore the signals of these media which have not been broadcasting for 6 months now. Sekou Jamal Pendesai, Secretary General of the Guinean Press Professionals Union.
It is a question of taking the lessons from the fight we have been leading for 6 months and projecting ourselves in the future to see the possibility of going together for a common front in this fight. A lot of proposals are on the table, so everyone will go back to base for deliberations, mainly the union that concerns us, and then certainly during the weekend we will make known our stand on this.
Nous allons donner une position.
Sekou Jamal Pendesai is the Secretary General of the Guinean Press Professionals Union.
This is the Newspaper Review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the Newspaper Review.
The Newspaper Review.
Well, let's head now to Monrovia as we join Darlington Popper for the Newspaper Review.
For today's edition of Press Review, we have Front Page Africa newspaper, the Inquirer newspaper, and the Hot Pepper newspaper. We will begin a review process with the Front Page Africa newspaper. Giving Meta green light, we see the photographs of President Joseph Yuma Boakai and the head of Asoro Meta on the front page of the Front Page Africa newspaper. Stay on the Front Page Africa newspaper. A mission of wrongful procedure. On the back page of the Front Page Africa newspaper is all about sports. From the Front Page Africa newspaper, the Inquirer newspaper is next. African economies to grow by 3.4% in 2024. County Superintendent Designate wants increment in development funds. War and economic crimes court establishment in sight, and the people is asking a question with the kickoff. Senate to act on horses resolution today. We see the photograph of Senate Pro Tempore of the Liberian Senate, Senator Nyombli Kanga Lawrence, on the front page of the Inquirer newspaper. Government asset recovery process on course. On the back page of the Inquirer newspaper, prioritize early childhood education. ECPN urges government. NASCOP, former Deputy Director General in limbo. From the Inquirer newspaper, the Hot Pepper newspaper is now our last stop for today's edition of Press Review. High-level meeting. President Boakai, Limkanska meets at executive mansion. We see the photographs of these two officials. Senate to act on war and economic crimes court resolution today. We see the photographs of several senators. I'm told they have been signing the resolution calling for the establishment of a war and economic crimes court for Liberia. Assets Recovery Task Force concedes pledge to follow due process. We will leave it right there. Lawmaker commends Beer Mountain for helping to undertake rules rehabilitation. Lead the advocacy for the establishment of War Crimes Court. Councillor Gonglo tells LNBA, that's the Liberia National Bar Association. On that note, that is how we love to conclude today's edition of Press Review. But before we go, these are the newspapers we actually followed on today's edition. We followed the Front Page Africa newspaper, the Inquirer newspaper, and the Hot Pepper newspaper was our last stop. On that note, thank you so much for following Press Review, and bye-bye.
Darlington Popper in Monrovia there with a newspaper review.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, let's take you back to the report from Mali, where Prime Minister Shugel Kokala Maiga reiterated that as far as the transitional authority is concerned, there is no election in sight. He said the return, which can only be achieved through election, is not on the government's agenda. These comments have been eliciting reactions, especially from the civil society space and political parties. Many sees these as worrying. Our guest today is Marie Josenga, Francophone Project Coordinator with Emos Network. She looks at the danger inherent in this move by the military government.
Thank you, Madam Marie, for your time. How complicated is this for ECOWAS?
For ECOWAS, this is another challenge that comes to add up to the previous one. You know, this situation already has been complicated for ECOWAS right from the beginning, so it is not new. It just come to amplify the difficulty or the challenge that ECOWAS will face in trying to bring back those countries to the West African bloc. So already ECOWAS has been described as a double standard organization. The issue for them is to know if they stick to their principle and exclude states that have experienced unconstitutional change of government until they re-establish governments accountable to their citizens, or do they compromise their principle to preserve at least nominal unity and allow authoritarian government back into the club? So that has been the challenge for ECOWAS. And this situation pose a serious threat again for in terms of peace and security within the sub-region, because there are risks with the withdrawal of those three countries, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso. There are risks of contagion from both jihadism and political disorder in the Sahel. So with their withdrawal, that risk increases.
At this point, CSOs and political parties are helpless. What can be done for a quick return to civilian rule?
Yes, at this point, we can say that CSOs and political parties are helpless because when we look at the context, transition regimes are not really very far from authoritarian regimes. So one characteristic of authoritarian regime is that there is less freedom of expression, there is less space for civic action, so that the civic space is relatively closed. So that is the situation, that's the reality at the internal level. But nevertheless, we believe that it is still an opportunity for CSOs and political parties to really show solidarity, to really show collaboration, to really show unity, because in this kind of instances, political parties and CSOs have been accused generally to be divided, and authoritarian regimes, they take advantage of breakage of disunity between those groups of the society to actually perpetrate their actions. So it is really, at this point, CSOs and political parties, even though they look as if they are helpless, they can actually mobilize and act in synergy.
That was our guest, Mari Jasenga, Francophone Project Coordinator, WADR Network. Here is Thankfully Sport News.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Nigeria's national women's football team, the Super Falcons, will hope to complete a double over South Africa when they lock horns tonight for a place in the 2024 Paris Olympics. Nigeria is going into the match with a lead after a 1-0 home win in their first leg. Reigning African champions, however, South Africa pose a threat against the Nigerians after their impressive performance despite losing in the first leg. Nigeria will secure a place in the Olympics for the first time since 2008 if they can avoid a defeat against Banyana of South Africa. And the FIFA Referees Committee has announced the appointment of match officials from across the globe for upcoming Olympic football tournament, Paris 2024, with a notable representation from Africa. Among the 89 officials selected, 12 hailed from Africa, demonstrating the continent's expertise and contribution to the international football stage. These African match officials will undergo rigorous preparation and will continue to receive close monitoring and support from the team of FIFA technical trainers, including referees and video assistant referee VAR instructors. Additionally, match analysts, fitness coaches, physiotherapists, and sports scientists are poised to provide the officials with guidance and support throughout the Olympic Games. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Chris and Mukudan and Maldaju for the technical assistance. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.